Hello there! This is a game played in 1849 between 12-year-old legendary American genius Paul Charlie Morphy and leading player in that time in New Orleans, Eugène Rousseau. They played the Italian game, and here Rousseau could have played solidly with the gioco piano or the too nice defense, but probably being in a fighting mood, he chose to play f5, provoking little Paul to take the pawn. Now, white does best to resist temptation and keep the pawns on the board, because if he takes, then black harasses the knight immediately with e4 and obtains a pretty good game. Now, of course, if the knight would have to retreat back home, then black could start celebrating, but thanks to the weakened black king, white has knight d4, and black better leaves that knight untouched, unless it wants to deal with some poisoned horse variation, starting with queen h5 check. Now, since moving the king to e7, blocking the queen and the bishop, would be like voluntarily bending over to receive a kick in the ass, black could try instead g6, and after white captures, not pawn takes because of the pin on the rook, but rather the active aggressive knight f6, trying to chase off the queen like a fly. But white, with a calm poker face, can play g7 check, and after the knight takes the queen, white gets a new one, leaving black minus a rook. Now, being up on exchange and with a much safer king, white is winning. For example, black could take on c2, king d1, knight takes rook, queen takes h7, threatening mate, queen f6, queen takes the knight with check, and now the material is even, but black is undeveloped and also has a trapped horse, so he's losing. But black doesn't have to capture the knight on d4, he can just calmly play knight f6 to avoid any nonsense with the white queen, and after white takes the knight, he recaptures and white has nothing better than castles, after which black simply recaptures the pawn on f5 and is happy because he stands well. So anyway, as I mentioned, Paulie was a little genius, and he knew that taking away from the center is not that great. So instead he defended the pawn with d3. Black attacks it again, but Paul castles, and blunders his pawn. Or is he? Well, no, not really, because if black would take on e4, then white would take on e5, and after the knight capture, queen h5 would again have some serious threats. Black would have to play knight g6, but after rook e1, bye-bye knight. So as you can see, taking the pawn on e4 would open up the center and the e-file, and you can't really do that when your king is out in the white like that. I mean, look at the white king. He's nicely covered up by his pawns, like a baby, while it's kind of windy around the black king without his f-pawn and open e-file. Black can try bishop e7, but after rook e4, he can't castle because of him, and black will be pretty soon exterminated on the e-file. Now, Rousseau saw all this, so instead he decided to defend his e5 pawn with d6. And this is the moment when Paul checks his position, king is safe, development is okayish, let's attack, and he throws the knight forward to g5. His plan is simple, he wants to jump to f7 and then take the juicy queen, or the rook, depending what's on menu. Rousseau doesn't like that, so he plays d5. The pawn takes, the knight takes. Now Paul really wants to put something on f7, so he attacks the blockading knight with everything he has, but unfortunately for him, nothing is enough to dislodge the knight. Being out of bullets for d5, our little buddy tries now to confuse his opponent with the spectacular knight d4. He's tempting Rousseau to take the knight so that he can invade with the queen. But there is also another idea. If black tries now to expel the knight from his territory with h6, there would come queen h5 check, and after g6, boom! There goes to the defender of f6. So after the g-pawn takes the queen, the knight jumps into f6, delivering a beautiful checkmate. Game over. Rousseau, however, thought that taking the shiny knight on e4 is a great idea, so he did. But now Paul's queen invaded the black camp, giving checks all over the place. Check, check, another check, And here Rousseau got fed up with the queen, so he decided to exchange it. But Paul happily accepts the trade because now he wins the rook in the corner. Rousseau now takes the pawn on d3 because it was threatening to win the pinned knight. White recaptures. And now Rousseau was thinking if he could somehow win the knight in the corner, he wouldn't stand that bad. I mean, he would have 2 pieces for the rook. Maybe things would be alrightish. So he moved the king towards the knight. Paulie quickly mounts a rescue mission for the knight with b4. His idea is bishop b2 and drive the king away from f7 so that his knight can come out. But Rousseau somehow guessed Morphy's intention and defended f7 with bishop e6. And after rook e1, he played bishop g8. It looks like the knight is imprisoned for life there, but actually he's not that sad about being in the corner because he takes away important squares from the black king. The game continues with bishop b2 and after king g5, rook e5, king h6 and bishop c1 check. And we can see what a great job that knight does in the corner. He takes away g6 from the king. This would be mate if black wouldn't have g5. After rook g5 though, Rousseau finally threw in the towel. He had enough for one day. White is threatening all kind of nasty stuff with the rook. The game could have continued with knight g6, check, check, g4. Now white threatens mate in 1, so the knight cuts the bishop's view. But rook h4 check, the knight is pinned, king g7, and finally bishop b2 mate. What a beautiful game by little Paul. Thanks for watching. See you soon.